We are two womanist race nerds talking shit over tea, dismantling white supremacist patriarchal capitalism one episode at a time.
I'm Queen.
I'm Jay.
And this is Tea with Queen and Jay. Ow.
I shared what Dr. Donna was talking about, when she was talking about colorism and how the term BIPOC, how she doesn't like how we're lumped in because of colorism and things like that. So I shared that in my stories. And an older cousin of mine, like a grown auntie level cousin, hit me up and she's like, what is colorism? Like, y'all use all this millennium talk. I was like, first of all,
that term was coined back
then. You're too smart for this. But now this is my responsibility, right? Yeah. She's mine, right? So it's my job now to engage in this exhausting dialogue about colorism that went on and was exhausting for a while in the Facebook chats, okay?
Oh, baby. Oh, my God.
Yes. Yes. So I think we have so many opportunities as people with good sense to talk to the people in our lives and like have those interventions with those who are close to us. And oftentimes a lot of us choose not to because it's uncomfortable.
Very.
But that's our responsibility when it comes to like those kind of micro things, right? Because I'm not going to spend my time. Of course, we have work where we have a platform and we do things, but I'm not sitting across from a man to try and change his mind. I'm not doing that on a micro level. I'll do it with my cousin because that's my responsibility. And when he's out in the street, the great black saying of, whose cousin is that?
Whose uncle
is that? Whose man
Come
is
get your
that?
auntie. Right.
That's because we have a community code. And whoever's in your community, that's yours. That's your responsibility. Yeah. And if they're out here wilding, that's on you. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's where this kind of micro talking one-on-one, talking to people who are in your community. There's people who I went to college with who they're a part of my community. I've known you since I was 17 and you're ignorant and we're too old for this now. And so as a part of my community, I'm going to have this conversation with you. So I think that's how we do these things on a micro level. Like talk to the people who belong to you because they're there and you're avoiding them just because it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. Talk to your parents. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
On a micro level, that's what I think we need to do. On a macro level, I think we should be fighting towards liberation. So I'm not having these kinds of one-on-ones like, you treat women bad. I'm not doing that. I don't want to be on that panel. But I want to, do the work that like awakens maybe a lot of people at one time. You know what I'm saying? Or like there's somebody who's going to listen to this conversation and not fully get it until they listen to the next podcast on colorism. And then it'll be like, oh, that's what they were saying. Like this is what they was talking about. It's an ongoing process.
100%.
To liberation, whenever that is.
And to your point, that's why I will continue to have it, and that's why, like, even for this conversation in particular, because I knew certain things were going to come out that can't come out in like a big, broader conversation. Right. Maybe nooks and crannies, somebody will get it here and there, but I do think like there are levels to this shit, and we've exposed a lot of them here. One of the things that you talked about community and like basically do what you can wherever you can, make that impact. What I do like is that I'm starting to see a lot more people have the conversation. Back in the day when we were having the conversation, 2014, first conversation we ever had was about colorism. We were the only ones fucking talking about it. Now it's like a lot more people are. However, I will say I saw a couple of interviews. One was on Revolt, and specifically in that conversation, it was called Black Girl Stuff. And on that particular show, shout out to everybody who's on that show. I'm sure that they are so thrilled at the opportunity to be on a show to talk about black girl stuff because I as a black man in all my privileges, recognize that we need more. We need more and more and more. And wherever you fall as a black woman, I hope you find a great place because there are not enough. But what I saw was 3 women who are, I don't know where they're from. I believe they are part of the Black experience. They say that they're Black. So for me, I'm like, okay, they're Black.
Yeah.
There's one woman who is more phenotypically Black, who looks Black, who's a darker skinned woman. And I already found that to be confusing and problematic. Why? Because oftentimes with platforms like Revolt, it is centered around a biracial Black woman experience, and then she's called Black. So for the men who were confused and always wanted a Denise and thought that this is just the Black woman that I want, they were never exposed to the nuance that says like, hey, this is a representation of Blackness that you're getting. However, we are therefore erasing Black women who have 2 Black parents, for example, who have a very specific experience. And we're also erasing lighter skinned Black women who have a very specific experience. And I'm looking at this and I'm watching them. And I also believe that biracial people have experiences that deserve to be spoken about and talked about.
I think at least one of them, and I'm not saying this makes it right or wrong, but
I
watched that video that you sent me.
One Instagram user commented, Black girl stuff show? Only 1/4 is Black. Make it make sense.
I honestly understand that, to be honest. Like for me, being a darker skinned Black woman, being the darkest skin on this cast, I do really enjoy that my Black is not questioned, right? I mean, I've got 4C hair, I've got the Black nose, I have full lips, I have a dark skin tone, and it really does, you know, on one end, I enjoy, again, walking into a room and you know I'm Black. But on the flip side, especially in this kind of environment, I feel like I'm being put on a stance to really like carry Blackness on my back, more so than you all may have to, whether you know it or you don't.
But I think at least one of them is just light skinned. Even though, and I say this as a nigga who's a nigga, she looks exotic. So I don't know if it's a texturism situation. I don't know if it's like her hair type.
I think so. I think I know who you're speaking about.
She said that she has 2 Black parents, but she does have the look of a more exotic kind of person, which is that more desirable mixed look.
Because even with that, I know I'm going off a little bit, but I'll get
please go.
But there are biracial people who are not light.
Yeah,
there are mixed, but because of what we see on TV, a mixed race person only looks like Denise. Where it's like, no, they can be your complexion. They can have nappy hair, and I'm talking about a Black and white mix. But they aren't always just passing looking people. But for some reason, that is because of colorism
and media you were talking about.
We think that mixed genetics don't work that way. Not everybody who's mixed is gonna be light skinned with that hair. That's just not
Look how disappointed people were that Blue Ivy came out looking Black. They were so confused. Why does she look like this? We are so disappointed.
But I think that's another thing, that people just assume that biracialness or mixedness just looks like what's the person who married the prince?
Meghan Markle.
Yeah, that's the only way that biracialism, whatever the fuck, I mean, that's not a word, but that's the only way it looks. And it's like, no, but you know, that's what we're taught to believe. That's what the media, the preference of the lighter skin, even mixed person is a colorist
skin, loose
thing,
hair.
you know? That is on purpose.
Yeah.
But what's your question
So
about
my
that?
question is that when I saw that, and I saw specifically how the conversation was going, and then I reflected it into the comment section. When I say how it was going, meaning of the dark-skinned Black woman was specifically trying to explain why people were upset about what they saw, right? Versus the biracial or light-skinned Black women. Not saying y'all know what's going on, but how they received that and how they were able to or unable to receive the criticism. And specifically for you, Jay, like, you know, you were talking about your experience as a light-skinned woman and how there was a conversation that you had with your family about that, but then how you learned more outside of that. When you see that conversation, I'm just curious, what's your opinion?
A nigga is disturbed. A nigga is embarrassed. A nigga is ashamed. But I also think, and as somebody who is quote unquote woke or conscious or whatever, I think that there's also a tendency for people like me who have an awareness of colorism, and I think some of the mistakes that they made in that conversation, because it was very hard to watch, was like colorism 101.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So colorism 101 to me, someone who's aware of colorism, basic awareness of colorism, when a dark-skinned person is talking about their experience with colorism, You don't tell me that you was bullied. You don't talk about your light skin experience, about, what people said about your hair. That's not the time. That's not the place, right? So that's colorism 101 baseline, right? But then there's these other nuances to it that I think a lot of light skinned people don't get past. And also because it's not to the benefit of society or the power structure to teach you colorism 102 or 201 or whatever, and to understand that it's a structure in place, right? And one of the women on that show said, because I'm light skinned or because I am whatever she said that she is, does that make me less black? And I think that the answer to that question is yes, it does. Right? Yes, it does make you less black. Yes. And that's the thing, is that there's so many nuances to blackness, or else we would just say that we were African or Nigerian or from Senegalese or Ghanaian, right? We say Bronxian, right? Right. We say that we're black because it is a unique experience that comes from the colonization and shit. So when you talk about am I blacker, Queen is blacker than me, because I will never fully understand what it's like to walk around in her dark skin. I'm not treated like that. I'm treated like a black girl. I live on the Upper East Side, and I get treated in a store when I have a question or I'm trying to return something. Don't get me started on returns. I'm treated poorly because someone who lives on the Upper East Side in New York, is a Jewish family woman, and whatever she's seen as a customer. I'm not seen as a customer, right? That's a negative experience that I have that's due to my blackness, my hair texture, how I show up in the world comfortable in my black skin and don't code switch at this stage of my life or whatever. That experience standing is not the experience of someone who is physically blacker than I am. So the answer to that question, right, when we try to defend our blackness so much, is that no, you're not as black as the dark-skinned person. You're just not, because there's so many different things that go into blackness, a part of our unified experience, even though there's a lot of culture in blackness. There's a lot of culture in Black Americanness. Yes. But a part of our unification, no matter, it's 4 to 5 black people in here who are all from different parts of the diaspora. What unites us is our blackness and those things that are cultural unifiers that happen at every place because we are, all African, quote unquote, and our experience with oppression. Yeah. And my experience with oppression is not the same as somebody who's darker than me. So the answer to that question is yes. You are not as black.
But what happens there, and why that is so hard for light-skinned people, is because they do not want to acknowledge their privilege. That's what that is. I don't want to let go of this shit.
Yes.
I don't want to let this go. So if I admit that this is real, eventually you're going to ask me to let go of that shit. And that's what it is.
Yes, because when I thought about that show, and I think about the hiring process, I know light-skinned women like you, Jay, who would have said, I would have had to step away and tell them to give somebody else my seat and referred them to some talent that could have taken that seat. And I thought about that, and I was like, they don't want to give up their seat. And somebody needs to give up their seat. Somebody needs to give up that seat, because you're going to confuse people, young, and I specifically think about just young girls, because I do think that from a desirability standpoint, Black dark-skinned men are having a very different experience. And I don't think that we should skirt around that. This is a very, very specific conversation about what happens in a space with Black folks when you are darker or darker than.
Because dark is masculine.
Because dark is read as masculine. So that's why Black men kind
of benefit from that. But it only goes for so long, because you could be George Floyd.
Exactly. Because, and then it's like, if you don't know, you're going to find out. But there is so much room, and there is a lot of space for privilege, that's why people don't give a fuck. But in another interview, specifically with an interviewer named Megan and the artist,
Mona Leo.
Thank you, Mona Leo. One of the moments that really freaked me the fuck out, and I told you,
just one, because I watched that too.
There was,
and I'm not okay.
There was one moment in particular that I got viscerally angry. Once again, it's just I can't help it. I'm just seeing this. I'm not a Black woman, but I was enraged. Was when Megan took a look at her co-host.
Yeah.
She looked at him, and she was like, because at that time, the question was, is colorism real? The response was like, of course it's real, absolutely. And then basically Megan looked at him and was like, but is it? Is it? Because is it? And then he was kind of like, I think you're talking about reverse colorism. Like, he gave her the word. Go ahead, baby.
Colorism is very real. It's a very real thing. not to take away from anybody who is a light-skinned rapper, but it's definitely easier for a woman with a lighter complexion to blow up quicker than a dark-skinned woman, for sure.
But like, why do you feel like that? Because like, I be getting into it with people, right? I used to get made fun of at school because I wasn't black enough. Bitches used to try to cut my hair. Like, people be thinking that like light-skinned girls don't go through colorism.
It's not colorism. If you're light-skinned, it's not colorism.
So what is it called?
If people's picking with you, then that's like, but it's not colorism. Like, colorism is discrimination against darker skin.
You're basically talking about reverse.
Well, reverse colorism then. Because they used to be like, you ain't even black for real. You're white. Go over there with the white girls. And I'm just like, bitch.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, I am black, actually.
I wouldn't say it's reverse colorism. Like, I don't think that that's a thing.
We also get, oh, you're pretty to be a black. Like, I've had white people and others.
Well, that's racism.
Yeah, that's racism.
We've been indoctrinated to think that darker skinned people experience a completely different experience than people who are light skinned, and that is just like the bottom line. And that is where the issue of colorism comes in, for sure.
And the way that I thought about that and the way that I translated that was how a lot of women who do have an experience in a lighter body and who are able to reap the privileges of that without acknowledging it.
The benefits, the power. We should talk about power as well.
The power and the automatic support. The automatic support. She looked at him for support.
In that room. Like, that's what she's used to doing.
It was such a cringy moment because they look back at her like, yeah, reverse colorism, and now she had to explain again. When you talked about, I don't want to sit down with nobody and explain myself to death. She explained herself at nauseum.
She spent that clip. What was it, like 7 to 12 minutes or whatever? She spent that amount of time of her interview as an artist who I think I may have heard 1 or 2 songs of her, but I'm not super familiar with her.
Yeah.
That's like not
her.
a show. Yeah, that's not a show that I would watch. But I would have loved to see a clip talking about. I love the black rap girls. I would have loved to see a clip introducing me to who she is. And meanwhile, what I know about Mona Leo is that she is incredibly articulate and intelligent.
Yes.
And I'm thankful to know that about her. But I had to learn that through her having this violent experience with a light-skinned person who decided to ask about colorism without doing any research on colorism.
Crazy.
You know what I'm saying?
Crazy. And then the immediate question that I had, and I asked the audience this too, I was like, how is it possible to be in community with dark-skinned black women and not be in conversation enough with dark-skinned black women to know that colorism exists? I'm still perplexed. I don't know if you two have ever thought about that. I think that this is a space of privilege, and I'm asking that question because it's kind of like if my best friend is a dark-skinned black woman. In fact, I would edit that and I would say she's a medium dark-skinned Haitian American black woman, and I immediately thought about her. I think about her all the time. All of the time, because I see the way that things are going. I see that the way that things play. I see it, and I think she's also realizing and waking up like, oh shit, this is a colorist ass experience that I am having. And it's like how I can understand that even as a dark-skinned black woman, maybe like you said, when you were in middle school, you realize that people are treating you some type of way, but you may not be able to articulate that.
Yeah.
But even if I'm in conversation with you as your friend, don't I realize that you're describing you had a hard time there, a hard time there? What is that? Why do you think that there's a lack of curiosity and care for dark-skinned black women specifically who experience colorism? What is that about?
Honestly, light-skinned black people do not want to admit that they benefit from a system because it's probably all they have. You know?
Dun, dun, dun. Okay.
I don't, especially someone who is, especially a black woman who uses desirability to navigate the world. Like, if you admit that I am only this because of how I look.
Yes.
Right?
Wow.
What does that do to you as a person? You know? So I think there's pieces of that. I think, honestly, a lot of light-skinned women, they hang out in gangs. Like, the whole friend group is... Sorry. It's true. No, not me. But I've seen it. No, because, like, the whole friend group is just yellow bitches.
I've seen that.
Like, so that's why they're not having these conversations. And when a dark-skinned person... I'm fortunate enough to have light-skinned friends around me who, when I bring it up, they'll just listen, or there might be a little back and forth, but there's none of that basic, like, oh, she's just jealous. You know, that type of stuff.
The main answer?
It's
They
always
want to cut
that.
my hair, and I was so cute.
Oh my God, my privilege.
It's just
it's a lot of that. But from my experience as a darker skinned black woman growing up, the light skinned women generally clicked. Like they were like groups together. So when does this conversation even happen?
Yeah.
And if it is brought up, dark skinned people we're jealous. We just don't love who we are. And a lot of people think you can love yourself out of colorism. Like it is a personal choice. It's not some systemic thing. Like I love myself down, right? Like I'm full of myself, right?
Yes.
But then I leave my house. And I live in a world that is colorist. I live in a world that is anti-black. So there's no amount of self that will remove oppression.
Yes, you can't follow dark skinned girl Instagram pages into like removing all of those feelings and the reality.
Exactly. And we put the onus on dark skinned people to dismantle the system, and that's not our fucking job. That's not our job. That's light skinned people's work. Y'all need to get that together. Like you need to give up the seat. You know, all of the things that we ask white people to do for black people, that's what light skinned people need to do for darker skinned black people. And until they are willing to do that, this is where we're going to be, and we're going to talk about this next week.
Right.
The other thing with privilege is like you just have it, right? So you just have the privilege. Every room you walk into, you just have the privilege. The privilege is there. You show up, you expect it to be there. It's there, like you expected. It's the privilege. And so when you confront people, because basically what you're telling anyone with privilege, right? But in this conversation, light-skinned people, basically what you're telling light-skinned people is like the world as you know it, it's not what it is. That is mind-blowing. Yes. Listen, I'm a light-skinned person. What you just did? Yes. That feeling. That like someone telling me, hey, when you did this or when you said this or whatever, and I'll say this again, as a quote-unquote woke person, someone coming to me and saying what you said to me was colorist and impacted me this way, or what you did, or every time you do this, routinely, it makes me feel this way and it's colorist, is fucking mind-blowing to me because I consider myself somebody who's working constantly not to do that. But I'm not working hard enough. And the other piece of this also that a lot of people with any privilege, again, we're talking about light-skinned people, don't want to acknowledge is that there's gonna be spots and areas that you don't see because you don't know. So if someone of a different experience from me is saying, hey, from my vantage point, right, as the oppressed person at this marginalization, when you do this, this is what it means to me. This is what it means for me. And that's not me as a personal thing, but that's a group thing, right? So not only am I hurting this one dark-skinned person, that's not the first time I've hurt a dark-skinned person, and I'm contributing to this society and this structure and this system that perpetuates colorism. That is mind-blowing.
Yes, it is.
Especially as a privileged person who has been catered to in this area of privilege. It is fucking mind-boggling. And unless you are somebody who's willing to like take that hurt, take that hit, take that feeling, take that ego hit, it's not gonna get done. It's gonna be, oh no, this is, that's a you thing, that's a, whatever, because it is uncomfortable. And again, I say this as somebody who people, some people would call me woke or whatever the heck. I have been told things being grown and light-skinned, that blew my mind, and I was not okay for a minute.
Shit.
Yeah, just because of and not okay because I don't believe them, but not okay because they're right. I believe them and I feel terrible, and that's an uncomfortable feeling. There's fragility in that, and it takes a while to get back to and accept that, yeah, you're not a bad person. You didn't mean to do this, but you were fucking doing it, and it's a shame and an embarrassment. It takes a minute to come back to and be like, okay, and it's gonna happen again. That's the thing. It's going to happen again. That's the other piece of it that people don't want to accept and acknowledge, that if we're in a constant state of liberation and people trying to get free, right? I have to accept that my one-on-one knowledge on colorism was, because that's another thing that people do. It's like, oh yeah, I know not to do this, that, or whatever. So I know not to do these 4 things to dark-skinned people, and that's it. I check the box, which is another thing that white people do to black people all the time, right? Which is why a lot of liberal white folks are harmful.
Yes,
right?
a mess.
Same thing in any area of privilege, right? So you check off these boxes, then somebody tries to present you with something that's new to you, and it's like, whoa. What am I supposed to do with that? But what I have to accept, and what we should all be accepting as people who are trying to liberate and seek liberation for all people, is that you're not going to know it all until liberation, right? So there is no set checklist of things to do or not to do, to be woke or to know and to be conscious or whatever. It's an ongoing thing, right? So right now I feel like I've been enlightened on some extra shit that I was doing or saying or whatever, and okay, we're good.
All right, okay.
Right?
I'm alive.
I'm okay. I survived
Yes.
this, right? In another 6 months, somebody could tell me something else, and I have to be prepared, willing, and open to accept and learn that, and that goes for all areas of privilege.
I agree 100%, 1,000.
For me, like what you brought about, like, you know, you woke, whatever. For me, that's like when you bring up hip hop, not to say I don't care about it in that space.
Gotcha.
For me, it's more dangerous in the liberation space. It's a lot more harmful in these woke spaces where people say that they understand dismantling. People say that they understand privilege. When people say that they understand all of these systems, but they can't grasp colorism. That's dangerous. And that's why when I started earlier, my liberation doesn't live in a light-skinned person. It can't. And it's because of that. They leave stuff out. And when you bring it up to them, even with all of these areas of wokeness or whatever, they will still not get it, because I honestly feel that people, they say it's real. Some people say it's real, but I don't think they understand how insidious colorism it is in everything.
Everywhere, at all times.
And it's in places where I'm just like, damn, I used to like that. You know, like,
oh shit. Yes.
You know? But it's such an insidious system that's been allowed to kind of just be a whisper for all this, all this time. Like, how many black liberation movements have we had in the United States, and none of the motherfuckers mention colorism, right? Like, we hear it there's murmurs, but no one stands and says, we got to get this shit no one does that.
Yeah.
It's still a murmur.
Yeah.
So to me, it's more like extremely dangerous in like the black academia and the black liberation spaces where people put language to stuff and do all of this, you know, make money for this stuff, and you don't, it is not an ounce of you breaking down at least colorist fucking theory.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That shit is crazy, because I think, you know, money is a huge part of it. To me, at least, and visibility is a huge part of it when it comes to navigating the woke space, because it's very much like, oh shit, we getting bread off of talking about trauma now? Ooh, let me get this bag. And they want me to come in and talk about it. I cannot tell you how many, you know, especially like lighter skinned folks that I hear that are actually having the conversation. But we all know plenty of dark skinned folks who've been having the conversation but are not getting platformed. And I think like that is at the crux of a lot of this, is that there are a lot of people out here who are hurting. There are a lot of people who don't have it and are looking for ways out. And now you telling me that I got to take a back seat so I can put your dark skin in? I'm not a colorist. I deserve this opportunity. What are you talking about?
And it happens
I
a
think
lot.
that I know that a big part of that, is in fact that. I'll say like my sister, she's passed away, but lighter skin. And I remember when she had that moment when she realized, oh shit, people are treating me better. And you know, my darker skinned younger sister, we're having conversations about how that juxtaposition of treatment impacted her, right? And it's like, this was happening all the while, you know, but later on in life, you can see how that like manifests itself in the decisions that she makes and the decisions that a lot of us have simply made. Like, for example, calling my other sister, the one who passed away, Red bone, and she cute, teen, look at her baby picture here, soft, fine, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And the other person there, it wasn't that she didn't have space to be herself, but she felt those moments of like, I wish if people were asking me how I was doing. She feels like she got less of that. My mother and my aunt. My mother's lighter. My mother has like a finer quality of hair, even though my darker skinned aunt had a lot of hair, long and thick. It's just so interesting how they were even juxtaposed. And my darker skinned aunt, yes, you were treated better than me. And my mother's like, me? No, man, nah. Yes. And I had to have that conversation with my mother. Listen, baby, you may not be light. You're not the lightest person in the entire world. But when she's telling you this, it's important to listen and not to feel like you're being lashed. When I say conflict and compassion equals empathy, I'm also mean conflict with yourself. That internalized conflict, those moments of challenging yourself, and then also having compassion, forgive yourself for what you did. Maybe you didn't know any better, but you have to be able to have that combination. You have to be willing to go there, because I remember when I was starting to get into these conversations, by now I've had conversations with thousands of people. And in every single place, every place on the fucking globe, colorism is a thing.
Yeah.
It don't matter if everybody black, colorism is a thing. And my thing is like, for me as a privilege, in recognizing my privilege, is that I choose to have this conversation because I don't want my dark-skinned daughter one day, if I have my way, because I would like to have children, I don't want my child to grow up and I'm here figuring out all kinds of ways to prevent, protect, don't do this, go here, don't talk to these people. I would love for her to be able to step out into the world in her glory. And I know that I'm going to have to do a lot of preparatory work. I know that we're going to have to, maybe go by Auntie Queen's house, you know, like maybe go visit Auntie J, so that you can get what you need. But I do know, I think about that, and I find it to be really problematic, because a lot of the people who I do see who are in the host chair, who are saying, talk to me about colorism, and then challenging you, they are lighter skinned folks.
Yes.
Because in terms of the system, they are being awarded the opportunity to sit in that chair. I think about Shonda Rhimes and what happened to the world of television once a dark skin or a darker skinned black woman has been given the reins to do something. I'm thinking about Issa Rae, who is a proponent of like natural hair, and like who is like a medium brown, half, I believe one of her parents is from the continent. I'm thinking about how things changed for her, or how she spoke about working laterally, or how she talked about community once she got access to power. And I'm saying that to say, what if the person who was sitting in these chairs were actually dark-skinned black women, and they were talking about colorism and how much more of an educational experience could it have been for those viewers, a lot of, once again, 50% who are not even of the black experience. So I do think that one of the more immediate solutions is to like, come on, y'all, like we need to be platforming dark-skinned black women. We need to be having, and also platforming, to me, light-skinned women who are willing to have the conversation. And thirdly, I think we need to be actually having conversations and let biracial people talk about their experience. Because I think that, you know, when you speak, like the biracial folks that I know who often, once again, are rewarded these seats, are not having a genuine experience. You know, we're having a conversation about black parents, but your mama's white, and I'm trying to figure out, and it's not to say that you can't have a black experience, right? But it is to say that there are certain things that you can't speak to.
The white mom biracials are a little different than the
black mom. It's a dynamic.
It is a dynamic. It is a dynamic. And then here we are in a position where we have to do the cleanup, right? And the cleanup is like, I'm going to plan something with Queen and Jay so we can sit down and talk about colorism, because we got to put something out that answers back to a shitload of comments where a lot of black women are like, you guys, this is violent.
And
it was so violent.
I'm gonna be honest. I saw what you sent. I did not watch it because I do not. I don't even talk to light skinned people about colorism. I do not subject. I know what it is. I know it's real. I don't. The same way that you describe on the micro level, getting them to talking to every light skin and making them get it. I'm not doing that shit. I'm not doing it. I'm not.
Come on. Come on, baby.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. But without seeing that, I already know what that violence looks like. Yeah. And I wasn't going to subject myself. I'm a dark-skinned person. I already know. I've had that conversation. Yeah. So I didn't watch it because of that. But it's ridiculous how accepted it is for you to willingly be ignorant. Like to have a microphone and sit and publicly just be ignorant. And it's okay.
Yes, and be platformed. Anyway, we can go on and on about that. But
I was a little bit. I watched it and was a little bit more disturbed by the fact that, you know, we had a conversation before we sat down here. We have conversations before we record our podcast. I was just a little bit disturbed and curious as to like, what was the conversation before y'all sat down? Because I thought they came on. They got a lot of questions about colorism and all of that stuff.
They don't need a reason. The same way white people just randomly bring up shit and you're like, whoa, I'm just eating my sandwich.
Right.
Yeah. No, they came. So you didn't watch it. I'm not going to describe the whole thing to you, but they were there for that segment to have the conversation. Everybody there knew they were going to have the conversation. And I just, for me, was a little bit confused that this was something that was prepared for, and the result was a phenotypically dark-skinned Black woman having to sit through that, what I would call
How does
violence.
a light-skinned person prepare for a colorism conversation?
I don't know,
Like,
talking to dark-skinned Black people,
How
women.
does a light-skinned person prepare for a conversation about something they benefit from and do not experience?
Yeah.
Right.
I think that is why, for a lot of the one-on-one, I don't think light-skinned people should be in the room. Because why are you there to refute that this thing even fucking
You know why? Because it was the host.
Sense.
It were the hosts. It was three. Remember, there were 4 hosts. 3 of them who are lighter
They
skinned,
were not
biracial.
qualified to have they were not qualified to have a conversation about colorism.
So Will, our EP, just asked the question and made a really, really great point that oftentimes people are not willing to have the conversation about white supremacy. So he asked Queen and Jay specifically, how do you tackle this? Do you have conversations about white supremacy first and see if that trickles down? Or if you go ahead and just address the colorism conversation? Because ideally, when people have the colorism conversation, it's only about desirability, which is what we did see in those interviews that we're describing, was that it was just like, well, girl, my hair. Well, girl, this.
And that was what's interesting about that. And just to go to like kind of scapegoating again, they were asked a question about power, which I love how Will mentioned off mic, like being in the room, right? Because the question was, why are these 3 very light-skinned, biracial-looking Black women in the room and only one phenotypically Black person in the room, right? Which is a question of power.
Yes.
Why were they given the access, the power to be on this show called Black Girl Anything, right? And why are we centering 3 out of 4 is a majority, right? Yeah. But if we talk about desirability, then we don't have to talk about power. Then we don't have to talk about the fact that even though these 3 light-skinned women may be, I'm sure, very talented and earned their spot and worked very hard to get to where they are and did all the things and will probably be great hosts or whatever. In spite of that, you have that level of access. Somebody picked up your resume. Somebody thought of you. Somebody looked at you because you are light-skinned. And I think we get so wrapped up in, if we keep it base level, if we keep it at desirability, we don't have to talk about the power. We've seen people who talk about, I've watched a very talented entertainer, actress, who talks about Black stuff all the time. One of the OG influencers talks about Black stuff all the time. I watched her, instead of addressing like colorism, somebody asked her about colorism. She's very loud and boisterous, talks about everything. Somebody asked her about colorism and her response was, I work hard. I'm talented. Nobody gave me anything. You were given access, right? And so instead of, I think a lot of times, light-skinned folks get very defensive and think, oh, well, are we saying that I'm not talented or didn't work hard? Or even when we talk about like the rap girls, I think Doja is very talented. I think Megan is very talented. They're all talented. Even Saweetie, who maybe is not the best rapper, she is talented at being an influencer, a personality, or whatever. There are things about her she has talent.
Right.
That doesn't mean that she was not granted preferential treatment, privilege, and more access. There's a reason why the first time I actually knew Mona Leo's name was from that clip. You know what I'm saying? And
me too.
I love the rap girls,
Me
right?
too.
I love the rap girls. So like, there's a reason why, and it's access. So it's not saying, yes, there are cases where, okay, you don't have any talent. Why are you here? But for the most part, we're not saying that these light-skinned people in these positions are not talented. We're saying that you were given a leg up. You were given a look when other people are not given a look. Somebody looked at you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then I don't think they understand that. Because if you look up, I'll just do it in the context of the United States. Most Black people are brown and darker. Light skin are a minority in the spectrum of Blackness. But you are all we see.
You would know.
That you would not fucking know. That is systemic. If you look at Latinx countries, you don't even know Black people exist there. So when they come here, you get confused when you see a Black person speaking Spanish. That is colorism. That is, like black people, brown and darker, are the majority of what blackness looks like, but the media only shows you light-skinned black people. That means that privilege is happening.
Absolutely.
Because y'all are not the majority, but you are the majority of what is on TV and entertainment and all of that. That is privilege.
Absolutely.
That's not by accident.
Yep. And the result is erasure. Boom, just like that. There's one black girl on a black girl show. I'm confused. How is is this even a thing?
But his question was, what do we tackle first?
Yes.
Right? And I think it really depends on what you're trying to do. I think having the knowledge that they're all connected is helpful, so that while you're having these conversations about racism, you talk about colorism, because you can't talk about it without it. Anytime I'm invited somewhere and I'm talking about my experience with racism, I make it a point, try to remember to interject that I'm a light-skinned person, so I can only imagine what would it mean if I were darker? What would it mean if I were fatter? What would it mean if I were disabled? What would that look like then?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Worse. It would look worse.
Right.
My answer to that question is to dismantle them all simultaneously, because they were built simultaneously.
Right.
Like, you can't, racism and colorism are play cousins, right? You can't exterminate one without the other. Like, that's why I'm like, just burn it all down.
Burn it all down to the ground.
But these systems were all created simultaneously. So I believe that they can be dismantled at the same time. It's just, we have to have people who are willing to do it all at the same time. And that's why we always say white supremacist patriarchal capitalism. And there's other isms that we can insert in there, right? But that's why we say those three, because they have to be destroyed together. We're not just going to talk about anti-black racism and that's it.
Yeah.
We're not just going to talk about misogynoir and that's it. We're not going to talk about capitalism and that's it. And I think when it comes to a lot of liberation spaces, they pick one lane and they stick to that.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
And there's not a huge. I think more so now. I don't know, because I wasn't back here in the '60s and shit like that. Spring chicken over here, right? But that's why I do, even though people have made intersectionality an identity, it's not an identity. It is talking about identities, but that's neither here nor there. I think that people, when it comes to liberation, if your politic isn't intersectional, if when you talk about freedom or whatever that looks like for you, and it does not include all iterations of blackness, and I don't just mean shade, I mean sexuality, I mean gender, I mean class, I mean, whatever. We are not free until we're all free.
Right.
And if your politic does not do that, then it's not for me. So I think that if we got better at lifting the people who have a more intersectional politics, so that more people are taught a more intersectional politic, that'd be helpful. I think that if we, because we're so indoctrinated, and because we're specifically talking about colorism, because we're so indoctrinated, I don't even think people realize that they love Angela Davis down, but Angela Davis is Angela Davis also because she's a light-skinned woman. Like, if you look at the Black Panther Party, the woman who was the spokesperson, all of them are light-skinned. And that is not by mistake. Even if you look at the Nation of Islam, the men who were spokesmen, all of them are light-skinned. Farrakhan's light-skinned, Malcolm X light-skinned, Elijah Muhammad's we are causing this harm to ourselves while we're trying to climb out of white supremacy.
Exactly.
Our black feminist icons, Bell Hooks, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou. These are, they are light-skinned for a reason. Like, those are the people who were given access, privilege, a look, right? Because no one would deny that these people are talented. We needed
Smart,
Malcolm X.
whatever,
They have all the things, but they were given the look.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying? And
absolutely.
that matters, and that's the power in it all.
And to me, like, that's the a lot of things can happen at the same time. A part of being an adult.
Lord.
Yes.
Light skin.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a part of, like, being, I think, an adult. Someone who is interested in liberation is to be able to step back. We talked about it before. That kind of like inventory that you take of self moment by moment to be like, yo, how am I moving? I remember even time like after like a conversation, I had to think about like, well, who are the dark-skinned women that I mentioned and what do they look like? Like, have I stepped in it in terms of highlighting or elevating dark-skinned black women who do have smaller noses or smaller lips or straighter wigs, or like, how am I basically perpetuating the same thing that I'm saying that I'm not. And there was stuff there because it was very Kelly Rowland. It was very Tika Sumpter. It was very, like you mentioned before, like Nia ain't really that dark. It was very like, it was something that I really had to take a look at. The same thing that I did with how I felt about trans folks. Before it was like, oh my God, I'm trans people, give them liberation, freedom, all of these things. But then I also had to have the conversation with myself about when my cousin was in her transition, about how I was fearful about being seen with her because of the prospect of violence.
She's in your community.
And
Back to your question about
yes.
community. How can we be in community with each other
and not
see each other's pain or how we're harming each other or understand colorism? Think about being queer in your family. Think about those people who like we love and we fuck with, except for their intersections, and then we're like, not that, no.
Exactly, because it's like if I'm on the streets with her and somebody feels some type of way, they're gonna attack the both of us. I have to be prepared mentally. I'm not prepared mentally today, so I can't see her today.
And she has to live with that every day.
And she has to live with that every day. And those things, I hated it. It was
Mm-hmm.
ugly. It made me feel sad. I was embarrassed. Once I process things, I tend to talk about it publicly. And I was like, I have to talk about this because how many of us think that homophobia or transphobia is about being scared of trans folks? No, sweetie. It's about you being feared that people are going to think of you in that way, being in close proximity to that, the violence that comes with it. There's a certain level of power that we have, and we hold on to the power by not acknowledging our privilege moment to moment to moment. So when I think about the power structure of the shows that present us with light-skinned women oftentimes in the host chair, now asking a dark-skinned woman about colorism, which they think that does not exist, the first thing that I think about is Diddy. The first thing that I think about are the people who are the power structures that don't want to be mentioned in this conversation, but we have to talk about it because as someone who probably has the final say on who's on the show or who has pretty much a protocol of who gets hired and how they get hired, this is a legacy of someone like him.
And that's why who you partner with, to me, is a politic. Like,
absolutely.
There's no way that there's a Diddy or even a Jay-Z, because he loves him some light brights as well. There's no way that does not inform how they employ people. There's no way how that does not inform how they treat. There's no way.
There's no way.
There's absolutely no way.
It's impossible. I remember, y'all, really quickly, we may even throw to this, that clip of Rick Ross in that reality show. And it's this girl, she's singing, run away, run. And this other girl is just like, yeah. Oh my God. And they were like, oh my God, she sounds amazing. She know how to do this.
You got me for the whole night. Baby, we gon' get it right. Oh yeah, I don't like no weedish. Just hook me and just leave quick. Oh no, if we go with a boss, no worries at all. I can give you everything you need.
Your future bright, shorty, your future bright.
The music was bright.
Smartest move in her life.
Me and another person had the same beat.
I'm really curious who has the other beat she has the same beat. Oh, Kaya. Kaya.
Boy, you can have my heart and all my love. I give you back 'cause I ain't too quick to judge. And I don't need nobody telling me that this ain't all the I can't see. So maybe we should run away. Run away. Find another place.
Yo.
They don't believe.
That wasn't the best platform for your voice.
Nope.
And Britt did sound better than yours.
They like mine's best, so it is what it is.
Enough is enough. But what I think about oftentimes at the root of it, though, is simply your spirit. The places that's just like, as a black woman, as a dark-skinned black woman, as a queer person, a trans person, a differently abled person, I'm thinking about those moments alone. Because I remember my moments alone, processing, like, am I good enough? Are the straights gonna rip me to shreds if I speak? Is my family gonna hate me? All of those kind of like life-changing big questions really impacts your spirit.
Yeah.
And just like having to go moment by moment of processing the brain, and the brains need to survive. We were talking about this. The brains need to survive. So stay away from these people because they're hurtful, right? Don't go to that place because they're not going to let you into that club. Don't do this thing because no one's going to listen to you, and how that impacts your spirit.
Especially as Black folks, the added burden of like feeling like you need to belong in a space, feeling like you need to, I think that impacts also the level and the nuances to the way that we treat each other and reject each other, and how classist we are and how obtuse we are to each other's intersections is because all of us, so many of us are thinking, I'm already black. You know what I'm saying? And so it gets a little bit harder for us sometimes to acknowledge each other's intersections, you know?
Yeah, it's rough out here. I'm just thinking more now and now. I'm just like thinking about my little sister, and I'm thinking about like how rough it has been because we've been having these conversations, adult conversations. And I think about like how she's developing and processing, and she just had a baby. She just had a little girl, Coco, my little niece. And I'm thinking, I told her, I said, you know what, we have to process. You have to process these things so that Coco, right? So that how you talk to her, how you commune with her, how you raise her, how you guide her can be not influenced by your trauma and your real-time processing of that, or not processing of it, but the ramifications of that. You need to start to deal with that. And we talk more now about spirit. And I wanted to ask y'all, like, how is your spirit? How do you deal with the sides about you that's not a black woman, the side about you that just wants peace and wants to be loved and held? How do you do this work, be confronted with conversations like this, and still maintain a healthy spirit?
I pour into myself a lot. Like I am, but I had to learn to be resilient in this way because the world not accepting who I am, right? As a person, just generally, I've always kind of felt outside of things. Like I don't know if it's because I was dark skinned or if it's because I'm like the only Muslim girl in class, or I know it now, but it was queerness. I don't really relate to these niggas like y'all, you know, like, you know.
Right.
So I had to create a system for myself. Like I had to just be proud of, like, regardless of whatever the world was saying, like I had to create this world where Queen is just the most amazing person ever. And I didn't know what I was doing as a kid. I didn't even know what an affirmation was as a kid. But I used to look in the mirror and just be like, you're beautiful. Like I used to just do these things because I just knew I had to. And I had to make it, I don't know what happened, but I had a switch went off and it was like, I dead ass don't give a fuck what everyone thinks. And I don't know how I cultivated that, but that has been really, really, really helpful for me, where I feel it's a privilege I'm not a person who cares about being in other people's spaces. Like I'm really, oh, you don't want me here? Peace. Like,
I'm out.
I'll make my own. Like my parents were very like that. My parents are proud as fuck.
Yes.
Like what? Okay, we don't need that shit. We're gonna make our own club. Like that's just what I come from. Like I don't need your shit. I'll create my own. So that has been extremely helpful. And I think as an adult, I am tapping into my imagination more, right? So I think about ancestors and I think about how you don't get free unless you actually believe you can be. You know what I mean? Like, there's nowhere you're fucking on a plantation picking cotton.
What?
You have to have some thought outside of yourself to believe, fuck this shit. And that's all you know. Fuck this shit, I'm out of here. That shit, I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's faith. I don't know if that's God. I don't know if that's I don't know what the fuck that is. But that is what I tap into now. I just have to fucking believe that whatever the fuck this shit is right now is not what it is. You know, like it's not it. I'm not going to accept this.
That's a word.
I'm not going to accept this. So those are the ways in which I kind of, I guess, recharge and pour into myself to come back outside and deal with all of the the BS. But those are, you know, ways, you know, I eat the food that I enjoy. Fuck what they say I'm supposed to eat or not eat. I'm very into making sure my apartment looks like this most amazing place because it's mine.
That's your paradise.
It's you know, and no one can say anything to me about what's in, you know, like, so I guess I just try to create those spaces wherever I'm at, so I can have a little inkling of hope or inkling of, you know, just a little slice of liberation for this little hour or whatever. But that's something that I'm really, really big in. big on and stuff. Yeah.
I love that. Okay.
I don't know
What
how
about
to follow
what?
that. I am really bad
you
at
did?
all of that.
Oh shit! Really?
I'm terrible at it. I really am trying to get better. Like I don't typically do resolutions, but I had such a rough 2022 that my goal was to take care of myself. Just take care of yourself. You know what I'm saying? So I've been trying to focus on those things that are nourishing to me and make me feel good and rested. Like all of my choices are dependent on, is this taking care of myself? So like there's this piece of work or project that I feel like really needs to get done. How am I highlighting and centering taking care of myself along the way in doing this thing that I feel like I have to do? Do I really have to do it? Does it have to happen now? So that's really what I focus on, is taking care of myself, and like, what does that mean in this moment? And it changes depending on like what's being asked of me or what's required or whatever. But I think that's something that we both do on a micro level when we're talking about like kind of addressing these larger systemic traumas, is like we have boundaries. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like, for us, because it's not our ministry or our work, we really only talk to Black people unless we're being paid to talk to or teach white people something. You know what I'm saying? So like our message is Black centric, and it feels less laborious. And like when a white person doesn't accept us, we don't care. A white person doesn't like what we said, we don't care. Or we don't get a check from a white person, we don't care, because we set a boundary that we don't care. And that goes for men of all kinds for the most part. That goes for even, I asked you when you asked us about coming here, I was like, yeah, of course, because it's you. And then afterwards, I was like, because if it was anyone else, we'd be like, okay, who's going to be there? What's the plan? I was like, wait a minute, who's going to be there? Because we have boundaries. Like even on the Grapevine, there's certain panels that we're not going to participate in because we know our emotional boundaries. Yeah. And I know that like when I show up, I give my all. This conversation, if I give my all, I'm not going to be any good. So let me just, that's a boundary. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like setting up a lot of boundaries in order to be able to do the work that we do in the way that we feel like we need to do it. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's one of the things that helps us not go batty like along the way, because it is a lot of, emotional labor, physical labor, mental labor, to dismantle these things, to explore these things, to, watch scary things, to be able to like talk about them later or whatever. Like it takes a lot of work. So just making sure like there are certain things off rip, we don't even do this, you know? And honestly, even this conversation, I asked Queen, she said she was down to be here, but I wanted to make sure like, are you cool with the topic?
I'm very good at saying no.
That's great.
No. And that
boundaries.
That's
one thing. I know that's not what you were. I'm just saying that actually, and it's funny, I was talking to our makeup artist about this earlier today. That I'm very good at saying no, but I wish more Black people were really good at saying no. Like get somebody else to do it. That Black woman who said that on TikTok. Like I want more of us to be like, no, like it's okay to say no. Like it's not a bad thing. Like you don't have to do everything and do all the work and carry all, it's just, and I think that's why it's difficult for people to understand systems breaking simultaneously, because you think that means you have to carry all the things, where it's like, no, I'm good at dismantling capitalism. You're good at this. You're good at that. So let's meet together and do this. Right. You know what I mean? But because it's, we think it's all supposed to live in one person and this and that. And you can't say no, because if you say no to this, then they might never give you this opportunity. Because to me, when you are not able to say no, you actually believe in scarcity. Right?
Facts.
So it's like, if you could think a little more abundantly, you could, no, this is not for me. And so that's what I wanted to say.
Right. What I want to say is, because she act like every time I talk to her, I just met her. I know that she knows how to say no. I'm going to ask anyway. I'm going to double check anyway, because what I also know is that we don't always read everything. So I want to make sure, did you read this though? Right. So anyway, but I think, yes, the like knowing your boundaries. I love what you said. Sorry, this is where I was going. I love what you said about it doesn't have to all live in one person, right? We do not talk to white people. There are other people who, looking at us on a base level, you might think that we do the same work. Their platform is yelling at, screaming at, and dedicating their lives to talking to white people. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
So that's just not something that we do. And white people need to be yelled at and spoken to. So I don't shade that work, but we don't do the same things. You know what I'm saying? And that's how I protect myself. And there's going to be, I'm sure there's black people who their area of discomfort is where we live. You know what I'm saying? The things that we do. And so that's really it. It's like, we can't all do the same things, and we need to really find a space where you can dismantle and then also thrive.
Exactly.
Even when you think about like our activists or whatever, I don't want to die tomorrow. It's people. That's what it requires. You know what I'm saying? For some people, it's that, are you ready to die?
Yes.
You know, and that's not always my lane. So it's really just kind of like knowing yourself and like what you need and setting up those boundaries to be able to do the work, to make it sustainable.
I appreciate that, because, you know, the reason why I'm asking about this is because in my own work, I have realized like there's a potential to talk ourselves into a coma, right? Like we can talk, and then I know for a lot of creators, especially people who are in this space who have been just burnt out down to the ground. You think about looking at your timeline, somebody done died again, you know. Now you're looking to this colorist shit. Now you're looking to the misogynoir. Now you have this anti, you know, queer and homophobic shit. It's a lot to deal with. And I oftentimes wonder, as we are fighting to be seen, right? Like what parts of us are we erasing at the same time? And I think spirit is always kind of sacrificed first. Those moments of like, you know, finding your solitude and talking to yourself and like you said, speak to me nice. Like, how can I sustain myself and do this work at the same time? Because you're in a space where people gonna say that you're angry as soon as you open up your mouth.
They say it when I don't open my mouth. I just be standing there.
When you don't open up your mouth, and then they say like, and now on top of that, we need your labor to explain to us why you're so angry in the first place. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how can your spirit sustain that? And I'm looking in my work, at least, to start showing Black people in a more human way, right? Not the human way where we just fuck up, but human in that there's a process to the recovery, whether you're recovering colorist or recovering, you know, hating yourself because you are queer, whatever it comes with, there's a certain level of spiritual work that's there, and it's not spoken about as much, I think. And I'm looking forward, and this is an experiment. That's how I consider this. I'm looking forward to finding out more about how Queen and Jay, as they're doing their work as a part of the mechanism to bring down white supremacy and patriarchy and capitalism, how do you sustain yourself? Because I know that there are plenty of people who look at y'all and like, well, damn, like, yo, I wish if I could articulate myself, or I was brave enough. That Bell Hooks and Laverne Cox conversation was so great. If any of y'all haven't seen that, check it out on YouTube. I checked it out because I first heard about that conversation because of your show. And when I was checking it out, Bell Hooks was literally like, you know, like, what's good with your wig and your shoes? And then Laverne was also saying that Janet Mock was like, well, why don't you talk about racist shit more often? And I'm watching Laverne and I'm like, because that's just not her lane. You know, there are still things that she is moving through and trying to get to the next phase when there weren't many examples of how she's supposed to move and navigate.
She does it now, though. She does it now. But it's a process.
But the process, right. and the connection of spirit to that, and how there are little people along the way who help, and little moments of sobriety of like, oh shit, like that was a read. That read helped me get there. Or this was a destructive year, and in that year, it made me learn how to say fucking no, or that I don't want to do this, or why am I doing this project? And I think specifically, when we talk about the margins, when we talk about the most alienated and ostracized, our differently able, dark-skinned, queer person, for example, when I think about them and their spirit, when I think about them and how they engage with a project, or having the audacity to step out, right? I really think that for our spirit, like your individual spirit, is to just recognize through your healing about the unique part that you play. And to your point, Queen, about like that self-reflective space, I really think that that's important. And it took a while, I would say, like in my younger years, for me to get to that point of just speaking nice. At first, I learned how to read. I learned how to cut people down first, because that was like the first step of defense. And then I realized, like, oh shit, it gets deeper. I can tell myself nice things. As opposed to being prepared to combat the mean things that people say. So like, even getting to the next step of saying nice things, it did so much more for my spirit and from my soul. And I have to always remind myself. It's not like a thing you just learn and that's it. For me anyway. It's like it's just been present, progressive. And I'm looking forward to just seeing like how we can consider our spirit when we're in conversation with each other. The last thing I'll say is that I realized this through that work about trans people and queer people in particular. What I realize is that people are having the conversation about like, how do you tolerate trans people? How do you tolerate queer people? And I'm like, if you just take a step back and first think about like what's your unique ability? Like why are you here? What is your connection to God? And I'm like, for white folks, a lot of them don't know. Because their unique connection is power and imperialism and taking over and violence. And that's how they equate power. And so on the inside, there really is nothing because all of that power is about taking away. It's on the outside. What I've learned is that like, you have a piece to the puzzle, your work is gonna dive into that. Yeah. You have a unique piece of the puzzle, your work is gonna dive into that. I have a unique piece, they have a unique piece. And this really helped me process with my cousin, who is a transgender woman, that the reason why she is so necessary to know and to love and embrace, not tolerate, is because she has a unique piece of the puzzle as somebody who is a part of the trans experience. When we think about ourselves as a community, we need a trans person. We need someone who has the unique experience of being born into a world as being identified as a male or having male genitalia and then transitioning and saying like, this is not all of me. This doesn't recognize my spirit. I'm so much more than this. I'm transforming and physically and otherwise, and maybe not even physically, but otherwise, I'm going to show you who I am. And that unique experience can speak to something that I could never speak to, that y'all could never speak to, Will could never speak to. But what it is a piece of the puzzle. So when I'm coming to my cousin, I'm saying, tell me about this. She gonna give me something I never heard. Why? Because she had a unique piece. And we all have unique puzzles. But what happens when you don't speak nice to yourself? Then you have no idea what you have to offer. So you're just trying to get people to like you for how you appear on the outside. So you bleach. So you decide that you have to tan or get some injections or do whatever. Listen, do what you want. But what I'm saying is that what I've noticed is that when we do the work in a capitalistic space that says you have to make money to pay these bills, you can learn to say no. Because my spirit says I'm full. My spirit says like I know who I am and that's not aligned with it. Even if I need a buck, I'll take something else is gonna come. There's no scarcity. I have a place here. So I'm excited about what you have shared in terms of spirit because for every dark-skinned Black girl who has been denied her humanity, I hope that she is able to go home into her safe space and have a moment where she can speak nice to herself so she can go out and do it again.
It's hard. It's hard if they haven't been shown it's possible. Like you don't know what you can attain, what you have rights to unless you see it existing.
Period.
You know what I mean? Like a lot of us ain't Harriet Tubman. We don't have the imagination to say, I'm gonna do this many times.
Exactly. Or willing to die.
Right. And that's fine to not have that. You know, a lot of us don't have that. So you need to see that something is even possible.
Facts.
Which doesn't happen unless Issa Rae has a series because she's like the only one who employs dark-skinned women. But you know what I mean? Like, so I am hopeful because I always want to think in abundance. But the reality is that how many Black girls get to have the experience that I have? How many dark-skinned girls get to create the experience I created for myself? How many, like, there's so many that do not. Like, I have a dark-skinned mom who also did not have these colorist ideas about her own. You know, there's just so many things that for me I see now as a privilege that I have these experiences that I decided, well, the world says I'm ugly, so I'm going to just be so delusional and say that I'm the shit that it becomes fucking true because that's the only way I see myself, right? So even that is a reaction to harm. Like, I don't know what the fuck happened or, you know, whatever, but something had to... Yes. To make me one day decide that that's what I was going to do. You know what I'm saying? And so I always want to leave conversations hopeful, but I also don't want to sell, you know, something that is possible to not be true. There are dark-skinned people who needs a system for them to change, for them to understand.
Facts. I understand. Yep.
You know, so, I just didn't want to leave with them thinking, love yourself outside of work.
Donovan love a good service. He love pouring into somebody.
And I'm
I
like,
do,
I want
I
it.
do.
I encourage it. I encourage it. I whatever. And I'm hoping that at this conversation does ignite something in someone, and whatever. But I do want to be realistic. As a dark-skinned person, every which way you see something telling you that you ain't shit.
Yeah.
And because you're not powering through it, it's not your fault.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
And we have to use our platforms as Black people, like with platforms. A lot of influencers. We know, as people with platforms, it's important that we are using those platforms to dismantle those systems that we know to be true, right? So how are, not you in particular, but how are you using your platform to dismantle colorism? How are you using your platform to dismantle fat phobia, transphobia, homophobia, all the things that we know are real and exist? Are you, we always talk about Black feminists for pay. Are you a Black feminist for pay, or do you live this shit? You know what I'm saying? So that's reflective. If you have a natural hair platform and all your girls look biracial and have 3C hair, you're not doing the work. You know what I'm saying? So it's really about, okay, we talk this shit. Are we doing the work? Is it reflected in our platforms? And so that's what I would say to people like us. Instead of, and I know that's not what you was trying to say, but instead of hoping that my dark-skinned niece, can pour into herself or whatever, making sure that I'm building what I'm doing on my platforms is going to build a better world for her. Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? Or make it a little bit safer. This corner, and that's something that, we hope with our platform, this corner of the internet is a space for you here.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So just making sure that are you doing the work? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I'm a Gemini too, so I tend to the conflict and the compassion. My thing is just how can we do both? Because for me, I think it's just so necessary. In my imagination, my daughter is going to learn Taekwondo and also
obviously
love herself. Okay, you might have to be somebody's
you
ass.
brought this up before.
Yeah.
You hell bent on this Taekwondo.
I'm very consistent.
Really
you know why? Because for me, when I was 8 years old, I realized I had to learn how to fight.
Okay.
I grew up in East New York. I had to learn how to fight these
You learned
motherfuckers.
Taekwondo?
Yes, I did.
Okay, that's why. I learned.
I learned, and it changed my experience.
Okay.
I learned, and once I learned,
think martial arts is gonna free us. Okay.
We both have martial arts as dads.
Yeah, my dad is
I'm telling you. Oh, really?
So we grew up with that also.
Yeah.
Yo.
So we see you.
You know what I'm saying?
It's not gonna liberate us.
It's not. But I'm my kid, just because for me, I'm gonna be really honest with you. My default is to fight.
Mm-hmm. Mine too.
I naturally, I'm what? You want to fight? Same. I have to talk myself down. So I'm just being really honest with you. I have done so much work to get to the point where I'm just Spirit, you got to meet this other thing. Because I learned how to do Taekwondo at first to learn how to beat people's asses. And through the experience, it was no, that's actually
that's not what we do.
You're not supposed to actually fight at all. Right? And through that, but the confidence to know how to and then make a decision. And I think it's same thing on the spirit side, to know how to and then make a decision if you have to fight. So that's the thing for me. I like a balance. That's the Gemini in me. But we talked about platforms and we're about to end. How and what can people do to support y'all on your platform? Find your corner and know what y'all are doing. Yeah, let the folks know what you're doing.
Oh, you look at me. Okay. Well,
Yes,
so our podcast is called Tea with Queen and Jay. We named our podcast before podcasts were a thing, but that's what the name of the podcast is. It's a womanist race nerd podcast. And so you'll find all of this type of shit and conversation on that podcast. So anywhere podcasts are played, you can also find us on social media, Instagram and Twitter at Tea with QJ. And our website, teawithqueenandj.com. And you'll find our personals there if you go there and follow what we're doing. I produce other podcasts and projects as well, so you can check that stuff out. And where can we find you?
Get it.
No, you do stuff too.
Oh, yeah. I don't like talking about myself, so it's weird.
Oh, no. Come on. Let the people know.
So as a part, I'll do an intro for you.
Okay.
So, yes, we are both Tea with Queen and Jay. Queen, long before that, has had her own platform. It's thriving. She's now moved into the YouTube space. She's a big deal. Okay? She's a big deal on her own. So, see, that's what you get. When I looked at you, you're supposed to pick it up.
You ain't say it yourself. Now we got to blow you up.
Tell us about your platform, Queen.
So I have a platform called Miss Vixen, and basically it's a platform where Black women and femmes that basically expresses that Black women and femmes are the standard, not the exception. And I just do work around that, conversations that, build and uplift Black women and femmes. And my approach is, because I'm woo-woo, so affirmations, this is that. But at the same time, the system is fucked up. So I like to bring those things together because I think it is important for us to address the system, but then also address the interpersonal things that you should dismantle in yourself and or build up within yourself, because you can't do one without the other.
Yes.
You can't just yell at the system and then go home to your empty apartment with no food and you don't like where you live. Or, just stuff like that. And I think that, especially in an activist space, or we're not activists, but like who are in this work and we have these conversations a lot. I think that because of a lot of the models that we have of what activism looks like is that you're supposed to suffer and like be poor and like
enjoy it.
And I don't mean poor as a pejorative. I just mean as, like you're supposed to be just eating beans in a cold room and selfless,
rocking back and forth,
not thinking about yourself, not loving on yourself, not having good sex, not eating good food, like fuck that, exactly. So it's where I bring a lot of that together.
Yes,
that can live in one person.
Yes, please check out their platforms. The last thing that I'm gonna say is
I know I'll make that awkward every single time.
It's kind of cute.
Yeah, we're both introverts, so we're both suffering right now. It's painful.
I know, it's kind of cute, but I'm like, don't let them fool you. You got to check out their shit. One of the main reason why you must check out their platform is because I think you guys have a beautiful way of loving people and correcting folks at the same time. And I think that is an important part. And I've experienced it. Like, I've been in conversations of like getting oh, wait a minute now.
We had a very tense moment. I am still not okay from it.
But a part of me, like, I don't know why, but I learned that way. I learned that way. I honor it. I appreciate it. That's why I was like, when are they coming back? Because that's how we grow. And I'm excited about what more you do with Tea with Queen and Jay and your other platforms. And the last thing, I want to give you a shout out because didn't you produce Kirk Franklin's?
Yes, season 2 of Kirk Franklin's podcast. Yes. I produced that season. He's having really awesome conversations with a lot of guests. It was, for me, he had a really great first season, but my priority, I wanted to make sure that when we spoke to queer folks, that we're talking to queer Black people.
Yes.
And so part of my goal, Kirk is, we know him to be a very loving, open person. He's down to talk to everybody. That was a part of his mission and a part of his goal as well. And I wanted to make sure that we were having those conversations with Black people, that we were bringing Black people from all walks of life to the table. So anybody who was down to talk to us, we spoke to them, and we had some really great conversations. I'm not Kirk Franklin, so I'm not going to say my favorite, but I feel like y'all know who my favorite conversations was with.
Right.
But yeah, definitely check those out.
I'm not going to say who I think it is either, but I loved the fact that you had a conversation, that Kirk had a conversation with Angelica Ross, and it was my favorite. And the reason why is because, let's break this door down. What?
Yeah, she laid it out. It was fantastic, and I think that for I grew up very hardcore apostolic Pentecostal or whatever.
Baby, me too. Oh my God,
I see it in you. I know. So growing up with that, that these can be hard conversations on both sides. Like not, and I say both sides meaning not to separate them so much, but we know that there's a Christian environment that says it's not okay to be trans. And then having a trans person, welcoming them into the space. What does it look like to welcome a trans person into the space and make sure that they feel comfortable enough to have this conversation? So yeah, I'm very proud of that.
You fucking should be.
Thank you. He had don't make me cry. He had a conversation with Karamo earlier in the season that
I did not hear that.
Definitely check
I'm
that out
going.
as well.
I'm checking that out.
And I guess he talked to straight people, but but I really love those episodes because I know they're conversations that people did not expect Kirk Franklin to have.
And
so I'm
so
thankful.
powerful.
Yeah, I'm thankful that he took a risk. I was producing the podcast like, they're letting me do this. So I'm thankful that I was welcome to offer my, creativity to that. And I'm thankful that they were open and flexible enough to have those kinds of like challenging conversations. So, yeah.
It's such a powerful moment for a lot of us who grew up in the church and a lot of us who knew that we had a place and they were talking about a God that we did not know.
Yep.
So to like give us the opportunity to talk about how y'all use our gifts and then you'd say that we don't belong here and being willing to do the conversation, you are doing the work. This is what we're talking about. You do what you can where you are. So congratulations once again.
And it's not, I don't want to pretend like it's easy. It's not easy.
But that's it.
Right, yes.
That is not shit. It's not easy.
It's not easy to show up and say, hey, this is what I want to do. This is why I think we should do it. And how many times when you show up at your job, whatever that job is, how many times you have to say that to get your point across? The compromises you might have to make to get it to happen, okay, what's my baseline for this is what has to happen here. Yeah. And this is how we're going to push culture forward. This is how we get to liberation. It's work. You know what I'm saying? It's not easy. You don't just show up and say, hey, this is what we want to do. And they say, okay, great.
Yeah.
It's a lot that goes into it. So
absolutely.
and that's not to like big up myself, even though I work hard, but that's just to remind all of us that it's not going to be easy when you say, we have to change things. We have to dismantle colorism, anti-blackness, all the phobias. It is hard, and sometimes it shows up on your paycheck, how hard it was to do, and how it's a sacrifice, and we have to be prepared to do it, and you have to decide, you have to decide where you're going to do it. You know what I'm saying? Because niggas got to eat, but like, it's hard. It's hard.
But nonetheless, very impactful. Like how hard it. Well, that's why it's impactful because shit is so fucking hard.
Yeah.
But I'll just say, like, for me, that's like as a queer person, I'm like, yo, what took so long? Trace it back, yo ass. And you should be proud.
Right. Thank you.
So again, for everybody at home, just follow these folks. Follow Queen and Jay on their personal platforms, but also Tea with Queen and Jay. Check out their work. Sign up for their Patreon, send them some coins, and allow the work to continue because they are really, really amazing. Check out the work. You'll find out when you check it out. Follow us at The Stranger Fruit. Shout out to Will, who's over there in the corner. Shout out to Donnie, who got a shout out in this. Shout out to my sister Tisha, my beautiful sister. I love you, baby. And just...
Yo, it's been so long.
Oh, yes.
What do we say something when we leave?
Brother, you know it. Give them the cue.
Oh, okay. Welcome to Tea with Queen and Jay.
Dad.
We are two womanist race nerds talking shit over tea, dismantling white supremacist patriarchal capitalism, one episode at a time.
I'm Queen.
I'm Jay.
And this is Tea with Queen and Jay. Ow.
Oh my God. That was great.
We've been owling for a minute.
That was great.
Owling before the owl caught on.
That was great. There ain't nothing left to say. Peace out. We are out.